So we're learning Shari second section of Tanya, page 150, L'kuti Amorim Chelik Sheni, Hanikre B'Shem Chinuch Katan, which is called, as of now, Chinuch Katan. I did want to say that I heard Rabbi Yoel say yesterday in the shir, in preparing it, that the line Shari Yichud Ve'emunah on page 152 in the header that I questioned whether the Alter Rebbe wrote it or not, Rabbi Yoel says just as a matter of fact that the Alter Rebbe wrote that line, and that it is, he himself coined the second section, Shari Yichud Ve'emunah. But for the introduction, which is page 150 in page Ayin Vav, that he gave a name Chinuch Katan. You hear that? So the name Chinuch Katan, right? The second section that he says is also called, its nickname is Chinuch Katan, the education of the minor, of the young person, the Katan, is referring to the Hakdama, the introduction to the second section. But once you go to page 152 and you begin chapter 1, it's no longer called Chinuch Katan, it's called Shari Yichud Ve'emunah. Okay. Then let's go. It says, Melukid, the third line on the page. Melukid mipi svarim umipi seifrim. This is also analogous to what the Alter Rebbe wrote on the title page of the first section. And that is that he's saying that I've gathered here ideas, mipi svarim, from the mouths of books, svarim, mipi seifrim, from the mouth of scribes. And the Hasidic Chabad tradition is that Svarim refers to the Maral, the Shalah, and the Rambam, and Seifrim, the scribes, refers to the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid HaMizrich. Kadoshei Elyon, their supernal holiness, the Shmos and Eden, their souls are in Gan Eden. Miyusid. Now here is the tagline of the second section of Tanya. Miyusid, it's based on Al Parsha Rishona, on the first section, Shel Krishma of Shema. And Rabbi Yoel pointed out that this is also enigmatic, because when we start learning chapter 1 through 12, you'll see that he focuses on two lines in Shema, Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem. He doesn't talk about V'yohavta. Because V'yohavta, you have V'yohavta. Then you have V'shinamtam Levanecha, teaching your children, Chinuch. Then you have the mitzvah of Tefillin. Then you have the mitzvah of Mezuzah. All contained in the first section, which is Parsha Rishona. Parsha Rishona, look at the 12 chapters. He doesn't discuss Parsha Rishona. The focus of Shari Yichud is the two first psukim. Shema Yisrael is what he will say is Yichudi Allah, called supernal unity, and we'll learn about that later. And Baruch Shem is Yichud Tatorah, lower unity. Fine, but it doesn't say that. It says Miyusid al Parsha Rishona. The second section of Tanya is based on the entire first portion of Krishma, which means V'yohavta as well. And Rabbi Yoel didn't give an answer. He said we need to think about this, because there is no. It's not. We don't know. We don't know why he writes Krishma. He should have said Miyusid al Apostle Shema Yisrael uBaruch Shem, which, by the way, on next page, when we get to it on page 152, well, before we begin learning chapter 1, there's two lines there where the Alter Rebbe writes that. There he writes that. But I was thinking, just as I'm speaking, maybe the reason he says the Parsha Rishona is because in the Hakdama, he does talk about V'yohavta. The problem is that these two lines are analogous to the two lines like in the beginning of the first section, where he says all of the 53 chapters are based on the pasuk Yikarev Elecha Adavar Mi'od B'fichu V'vav Chalasoisei, right? And when you learn the 53 chapters, there's constant flashback and mention in chapter 12, in chapter 17, in chapter 35, in chapter 50, 51, 52, 53, whatever. In other words, we see that the pasuk Kikarav Elecha Dover Me'oi B'Fiful Avav Kol HaSoisoi, which the Alter Rebbe says on the title page of that Tanya, the first section, is based on that. We see it through in many chapters in the first 53 chapters, but here we don't find that the Parsha Rishona is in the 12 chapters. So I'm thinking that just as the name Chinuch Kotten is given only because of the introduction, but from chapter 1, but as far as the text of the chapters itself, from 1 through 12, it's all about Shara Yichud Ve'Munah, the unity of God and the faith in God, and the idea of Chinuch Kotten is not emphasized there, is not explained there, and that's acceptable. So too, maybe the reason he says Parsha Rishona is because in the introduction he does talk about the V'yohavta. It's my own thought, possibly. Let's learn now. Finally, Chanoich Lenar Al Pidarkoi. It's a pasuk in Proverbs, in Mishlei. Educate the lad, the youth, Al Pidarkoi, based on his style and form. So that, Gam Kiyaskin, so that when he will be older, Lo Yoser Mimena, that education that you educated him as a child, as a lad, won't dissipate, won't leave him. He'll still keep that education and live with that education. Hine midrasiv, since it says al pidarkoi, educate the child based on his derech, his style. Mashma, the implication is she'ena derech ho'emes la'mitay, that this education that you're giving him is not the truth of the truths. In other words, teach him, Avram, teach him and educate him based on who he is as a young man. That implies that when he's an older man, a child, that implies when he becomes an adult, don't teach him that, because that's not what an adult needs to hear. If so, Ma'amal Yusa, what's the benefit? Shagam Kiyaskin, what's the benefit that Shlomo Melech says in Proverbs that when he's old, Lo Yoser Mimena, he won't vacate it, he should vacate it. You teach him as a child, do this and I'm going to reward you. Don't do this because you'll have trouble, right? As you get older, the Rambam writes this. We don't teach an adult, do Torah mitzvahs because you're going to get a reward, because it's the right thing to do. But a child doesn't understand. So you give them that candy, the Rambam says, and from candy it goes to toys, and from toys it goes to honor, and on and on. But those are all youthful types of education that ultimately is not the real reason. So Yoini, the Alter Rebbe's question on the verse in Mishlei is, what is Shlomo Melech saying here? Chanoich lenar al pi darkei gam ki yaskin lo yoser mimena. I want it should be yoser mimena. I want it to leave. I don't want an adult to do service of God because of candies, pleasures, toys, and honor. So in other words, what's the value of chinuch katan, of the style of educating a youth al pidarkei, based on what he or she as katanim need in their youth? What value does that have for when they're later older? That's the question. Let's continue. To answer this, we need to give a known idea. The source of service of God and its foundations are awe and love. Hayira shoyresh v'yasoid l'sur mira. Awe, fear, reverence is a source for sur mira, for preventing yourself from doing evil. Ve'ohava, And love of God is a source l'vasei toiv, to doing good. V'kiyim kol mitzvahs asay, and to fulfill all mitzvahs, positive commandments, the oraisa with the rabbanon, the biblical and rabbinic, k'moishi yizboer. You see? I told you yesterday. It doesn't say k'moishi nizboer with a nun, but it says k'moishi yizboer, as will be explained b'mekoymon, in its place. And this is a reference to Tanya chapter 4. Right? So here we are in the second section of Tanya. We already learned chapter 4 in the first section, and it says, as it will be explained in chapter 4 of Tanya, section 1. This is one of the places that proves that the Alter Rebbe, when he originally wrote this, intended for this to be the first section of Tanya. And then I want to go back to the language over here. Look at the language, guys. It says, it says two languages here. Pay attention. Shoirish, the source, right, the root. V'yesoid seha, and the foundation. What's the difference? And the difference is, the shoirish is where you come from. Your roots. V'yesoid seha is not just where you come from, but yet you are now independent. V'yesoid seha, the building that goes up, is based on the foundation. And what happened in Surfside, Florida several years ago, when the building collapsed like a pancake, right? That's because the Yesodos, the foundation, was rotten, was destroyed, was ruined, so it fell and like a pancake. Rahman al-Islam, many Yidden, two of who we knew from the Lubavitch community, passed on. What am I saying? What am I saying? Why am I sharing this? You can have good roots. My grandfather and my great-grandfather was this chassid, was this gadol, But if it's not for Yesod Seho, if it doesn't become your foundation as part of your building, it's meaningless. It's nothing. It's like you always say, yichus is a bunch of zeros. If there's a one there, it makes the zeros valuable. No one there, it's a gurnisht, efes, bupkis, nothing. So the Alter Rebbe says here, the shoirish, the source, the roots of Avodas Hashem and the Yesod Seha requires two elements: awe for Hashem, reverence, yira, and ava. And both of these notions, not only are they the way, where a person will have a relationship with God, as far as my parents brought me into the world, into a frum home, but you will stay that way. It will become Yesod Seha, that as you grow and as you develop your family, as you become an adult and you have grandchildren, the Yesod Seha, the building that you built, will continue standing. The edifice will be eternal and everlasting. Why? Because it's not only roots, but it's a foundation. A very, very important point that is very, very kind of cryptic in the words of the Alter Rebbe here, but that's what he's alluding to. Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem isn't just, it's a good thing. I have a nice feeling. I want to be inspired. So I go to a good lecture, I go to a good shir, I go to a good chazan, I go to a good bal tefillah, I go to a good Karlbach minyan, and I feel great. What about when you finish the Karlbach, when you come outside? Are you still, and later, as the day goes on, and the next day, and the third day, right? You go to Karlbach minyan on a Monday, on a Rosh Chodesh, and they're playing there with the music, beautiful. No, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night, they can do singing again. What about Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? I would like to see you on those days. Are you jumping up and down and all ecstatic about Hashem? Then, if you are, then it shows that the music of Rosh Chodesh went into your bones, it's in your DNA, and you can't sleep because of it, and you're just jumping, singing for Hashem. But otherwise, okay, it was a nice thing, a nice experience, and a beautiful experience. But it doesn't last. It's a shaydish. It's only a root. It has to become Yisod Aseh, where it's your foundation for your building Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Okay, let's continue. And he says, he just gives you the reference that the mitzvah of chinuch is also considered part of the commandments. Mitzvah aseh, positive command, b'shkosev b'Orach Chaim, as it says in Shulchan Aruch, the laws, a section called Orach Chaim, Siman Shem Mem Gimel, chapter 343. Okay. So now he tackles the notion of love for Hashem. It says, Kosov, Pashas Ekev, Kosov, Ekev Asher Anoichi Mitzave Eschem Lasoisai, because I have commanded you to do it. Le'avas Hashem, to love God. Asks the Alter Rebbe, V'goyme, V'tzorach L'hovin. What does Hashem mean by saying you are to do love? I either feel it or I don't feel you, God. I either love you or I don't. Can you force God to, can God force you to
fake it till you make it?
Yeah. Can Hashem force a Jew to have love in his heart? Come on. We're not talking, you said fake it till you make it. God is not a faker. We're the fakers. But Hashem is emes. Hashem is true. So if Hashem in the Torah says, Lasoisa, to do Ava, that's the question of the Alter Rebbe. What do you mean to do Ava? You can't force Ava. So let's go further. Eich shayach lashon asiyah. How is the language of the Torah, asiyah, possible gabe Ava shebelev, when referring to a love within the heart? And the explanation that he explains, to answer this question, the yeshnei min Ava. We're talking about two kinds of Ava. Avas Hashem, love for God. Ha'achos, one of them, he klois ha'nefesh betiva. The first kind of Ava is the cessation of soul, the expiration of the soul, betiva, by its very nature, el boira, to his creator, to God, when a Jew's intellectual soul will overpower al hakomer, over the material of the body, v'tashbilehu v'tachineu, and it will lower it, and it will, better said, subjugate it, tachteha, under its control, azai then, tislahe v'tislayet, kishal heves ha'oile, next column me'aleha. The fire of the soul will flame itself and rise automatically. The togel, and it will rejoice. The tismach, and it will be happy. But Hashem, in God, God is its creator. V'tisanig al Hashem, and it will have pleasure for God. Tainuk nifla, a wonderful pleasure. Lemailas Ava Rabazu. You see here, Chevra, the Alter Rebbe calls this the abundant level of Ava, which we learned about in chapter 43 of Tanya. Those that are Zoche, you hear Isser, those that merit this first level, just like it says in chapter 43 in Tanya, Chevra, this level of Ava is a schus, a merit. You don't get it automatically by doing mitzvahs. What the mitzvahs do, it makes room and makes it possible that if Hashem wants to bless you with this sensation and this feeling of love for Him on the highest level, to the point where all you want is Hashem, you're available. I'm available for you, God, but I can't turn it on. All I can do is make myself into a receptacle that the arena, the area is clear. Now, if you want to gift me that, I'm here. That's the first thing. And that's why it says, those that merit to this level of Ava Rabba, Heiman Nikroim Tzadikim, this refers to the Tzadikim. Kedichsiv, as it says, Simchu Tzadikim B'Hashem, be happy Tzadikim with God. Right away he says, Ach lo kol adam zoicha lezeh. Not every person merits this. Ki lezeh tzorich zichu chachoyme b'ma'oid ma'oid. The Alter Rebbe says, to get this gift, you need to really refine your physical material very, very much so. And he's not talking about subjugating the Yetzer Hara and the Nefesh Abamis. He's talking about you have to become a person that all that interests you is God. Zichu HaChomer, the way the Alter Rebbe refers to it here in the second column, is not the same as Tashpileu v'Tachineu, the subjugation of the material which you alluded to at the end of the first column. That means subjugating your Yetzer Hara and your Nefesh Abamis. Here he's talking about a schus. In order to get a schus, it says, one needs to refine themselves so much so that what they feel is spirituality, not physicality. Like, can you imagine? But that, and because then you're a keli, you're a vessel for a schus, and that's why it's a very high level. That's why it's called Ava Rabba, and that's why it's not for the average person, only for the tzaddikim. Let's continue. The gam, in addition to refining your material and physical, the gam Torah Maisen Tova Harbe. You need to learn a lot of Torah and do a lot of good deeds. Harbe, lots of. Liska is to merit Linishmas El Yoina, to this supernal soul, Shelamaylim Madregas Ruach V'Nefesh, which transcends the lower levels of spirit and soul. Kameshkosav Bereishis Chochma Sharava. Briefly, it says over there in Bereishis Chochma, there's 3 levels, right? We know there's 5 levels. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chai, Yechida. We're talking about the first 3. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, i.e. Naran. So the difference is that Nefesh is the lowest level, is associated with action, or as it says elsewhere in Chassidus, Kloyos, it's the Kavda, the liver. The advice comes from the liver, which has the practical aspect. Okay, it's more practical. Then there is Ruach Malala, Ruach of speaking, Ruach is associated with the Midos, the Lev, the heart. Also very nice, but still it's already of an orientation, a feeling. Then you have Neshama. Neshama is Moyach, brain. The brain and the moyach, compared to the heart and the liver, is much more refined. So so Reishis Chochmah says, and explained also Chassidus at great length, that it's the neshama elyoina, that level of spirituality, that one will merit to access through lots of Torah study and many good deeds. And as he says, the language, ma'oid. Right? And he says the language. No, I'm sorry. Harbe, the gam Torah Maisen Tovim Harbe Liskois L'Neshama Elyoina. You need lots of learning, lots of Maisen Tovim to have the schus of being gifted this, which is, he says, what we call the supernal, the upper soul, in comparison to Ruach and Nefesh, which is the lower levels, which is the experience that he's talking about here. The bottom line is that this higher level of Ava, you can't make. Right? The question is, it says in the Torah, Hashem says, you shall make the love. The Alter Rebbe's question is, you don't make the love. You either have it by feeling it or not. And the answer is there's 2 levels of love. This higher level you can't make. This is either a merit you get or you don't get. And usually it only goes to tzaddikim. But tomorrow we're going to learn the lower level of love, which is what we call the chinuch katan, right? The education of the katan, of the minor, the lower. That we can make and create. And that we'll learn about tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone. See everyone tomorrow, Mr. Shem. Take care. Bye-bye.
Oh,